right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending today's session on who to call. Thank you to our panel, Pam Mack, Mark Heinert, and Jackie Seefelt for presenting today. Just a couple of reminders before we get started. Just those of you that are attending, please keep your monitors or your videos and your microphone off during the presentation. We will open up for discussion. So if you'd rather ask your question, you can unmute, or you can also type your question in the box and I can relay them to the presenters. This is kind of an open session, just free discussion and hopefully educating on who to call when we're in situations. Also, again, if you need a certificate of participation, please put your first and last name and email in the chat box at the end of today's presentation, and we will get those sent out to you. So with that, I will pass it on to Pam Mack.
Right. Thanks, Kylie. I'm Pam Mack, and I'm the Advocacy Director with the North Dakota Protection and Advocacy Project. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you folks today. I did dump my PowerPoint in the chat because there's actually going to be a few slides that I'm going to just skim over real quick just for the purposes of time, but wanted you folks to be able to have them. So Kylie, are you able to allow me to share my screen, or do you want to pull up the PowerPoint and share it? Whichever is easiest for you.
Are you able to share it now?
I believe I can. Did that work for you folks?
Yep.
Okay. So just a little bit about the P&A, and I'm gonna cruise through these relatively quickly, just because I want to make sure that there's enough time to answer questions and hear from other folks too. But we are the North Dakota designated disability rights entity. There are 57 P&As across the nation, and we are established under federal law to provide rights protection and protective services to individuals that have disabilities. And so in North Dakota, we are an independent state agency. Federal law requires that we cannot be part of any other umbrella or entity that's part of a state government system, because we do have the authority to sue the state should there be a need to do so. And so that is one of the requirements. There are many P&As across the nation that are private nonprofits, but we have found in North Dakota that it is really beneficial to be part of the state government system because we're able to supplement a lot of our federal funding with state dollars. We do provide disability rights services and protective services to people of all ages and all types of disability. Our focus is on exclusively the person. So it is, what is their need? How do we protect them? Granted, they may have parents, they may have guardians, they may have a custodian. And while they have a role, our responsibility is to focus on that individual. Our services are funded through federal grants and state money, and there is no cost to the individual for those services. We do have several federal programs and contracts. I'm not going to go into all the details of them, but you'll see the majority of them are based upon different types of disabilities or a specific caveat of serving a group of people. So traumatic brain injury, mental illness, developmental disabilities. We do have a program that ensures that assistive technology needs of people are met and that there's adequate funding and support for that. Where we also have a responsibility to ensure that people have unimpeded and accessible opportunities to vote and be part of our democratic government system within the state. And then we do have a contract to provide rights protection and or resolve complaints that occur with Centers for Independent Living or vocational rehabilitation, and that's our client assistance program. So part of the services that we provide is we do have a centralized intake unit who is able to provide information and referral for people that contact our organization, but perhaps they are not within either the scope of disability or a scope of our priority that we're able to support. And so we oftentimes, much like the ADRL and other entities, will refer individuals out to appropriate supports or services if they do not fit within our purview. Just quickly, some of the services that we do provide is that advocacy, assistance, representation, or if needed, legal services to resolve disability rights issues. We are required by federal law to resolve cases at the lowest level of intervention possible, and legal intervention must be a last resort. And so we do have staff attorneys that oftentimes will consult on cases, and if need be, will pursue litigation or legal efforts to resolve issues. But again, that is something that we avoid at all costs. It's just something that it becomes contentious while it's sometimes necessary in order to preserve the rights and enforce them for people. It definitely is not our first avenue of intervention. We also, under our P&A umbrella, have the responsibility to provide what's called protective services. And that is ensuring that reports of suspected abuse, neglect, and exploitation of individuals with disabilities are responded to, investigated, and risks are mitigated that might accompany that. We do have authority for all ages. However, in North Dakota, we do have a collaborative and cooperative agreement that we do not duplicate what another entity provides. So if someone is going to be served by child protection, then P&A would not be involved. But if child protection determines that a report or an incident does not meet their definitions or is not something that they will conduct an assessment of, then P&A does have the authority to conduct that investigation and look into the situation. So again, protection and advocacy, just what those two words are, that protective services and that advocacy is what our responsibilities are. We also do a lot of systemic work to not only improve the system, but ensure that we're identifying how can we be partners and collaborate in issues that will just strengthen the disability system as a whole. So all of those things become part of what we take a look at in the work that we do. We also advocate for groups that promote self-advocacy and involvement of parents and children and adults with disabilities, and also try to make sure that we are an avenue for information regarding legislative and policy activities. So during the session, we do host weekly legislative working committee meetings to really try to keep people informed. We cannot and we do not lobby. However, we are able to educate the public, educate people and policymakers on disability rights issues. Each year, we are required to establish priorities or areas of focus for the work that we do. And so I just included some brief information about those different areas that I'll run through real quick. So again, abuse, neglect, and exploitation, we do training to ensure that service provider staff and people are knowledgeable about how to prevent A&E and how to respond to potential mistreatment that's occurring. We investigate reports or allegations of mistreatment, and we also engage in systemic monitoring to ensure quality assurance of individuals with disabilities. We do a lot of work, which is primarily with the work that you folks do in the area of community inclusion, ensuring that people have the right to live in the community and can avoid institutionalization if at all possible, that we're looking at how can we ensure that children that have disabilities or autism are able to stay in their community homes and with their families, and ensure that people have that right to live in the least restrictive environment or setting. And so we often use Money Follows the Person and the supports within your program to be able to make that a reality for individuals. We do a lot of work with criminal and juvenile justice reform. We do have a project called Individual Justice Planning that looks at a tailored response to either address involvement in the criminal justice system or prevent involvement. And we do that a lot with youth that are displaying at-risk behavior or have become involved in the juvenile justice system, and it's not appropriate or it doesn't provide for the supports and services that are needed. So all of those different aspects of advocacy support we're able to provide. We do a lot of special education and 504 education work for students with disabilities, and that is across a number of different service areas that I've just kind of listed there. And we also have two programs that specifically look at employment opportunities for people with disabilities, opportunities for people to get off of Social Security benefits and be gainfully employed with the necessary accommodations or modifications to their job, and to really ensure that vocational services and supports are available to allow people with disabilities to work within the community. We do a lot of work with Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, and veterans benefits, denials of services or supports, assistive technology, healthcare coverage, all of those different things, as long as the issue that's presented is connected to the person's disability. And then I did touch just briefly about our voting access program earlier that ensures that accessible voting machines are available at polling sites, that voters with disabilities have the information and access to be able to participate in that aspect of their life. And then we have a new program that actually began in 2019 and has now been put into state law that's called supported decision making. And it's an alternative to guardianship so that people can receive the support and assistance that they need to make decisions on their own without having to have a court-appointed attorney or be found incompetent. And so that is something that we're doing a lot of public education and outreach to promote. And there's some great resources about supported decision-making on our PNA website. So we do have 10 offices across the state, the 8 large, I say large, to our state, Human Service Center regions. And then we also have an office in Grafton where the State Developmental Disabilities Institution is located. And we have an office on the Belcourt American Indian Reservation. So those are our 10 offices. And I've just then included information about how to contact PNA, both a local number for Bismarck-Mandan, a statewide toll-free number. We do have hours, after hours, we have on-call staff that are available 24/7, and that includes holidays and weekends. So you can always reach someone at PNA if there's either a protective services or a disability rights need, and then just information regarding our website and how to contact our intake staff. So that's just a little bit about our services. And I know I did that really quickly, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but want to make sure that I allow ample time for others to present and answer questions too. So thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Next, we have Mark Heinert with Youthworks.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be a part of this conversation here today. My name is Mark. He, him, his are my pronouns, and I have been at Youthworks for the last 26 years. If you're not familiar, many of you have probably heard about us. Youthworks serves youth that are runaway, homeless, trafficked, or at risk of that or struggling in some way, shape, or form. So our primary population is youth ages 12 to 18, and our homeless services actually can extend all the way from 18 all the way up to 24. We have service locations across the state. I did drop our website. I didn't drop a PowerPoint like Pam. She beat me. She's got one up on me. Dropped our website address though, so feel free to click on that and you can navigate to see what might be available in your part of the state. We have primary services in Bismarck and in Fargo, with some shelter and minimal services in Minot, shelter with some minimal services in Grand Forks. And then we also have an anti-trafficking employee in Dickinson as well. So those are the locations that we actually have employees on the ground. In terms of what those services look like, most people, the first thing that they're thinking about is that those two words, the runaway or homeless. And so for youth that are under the age of 18, those youth would have the ability to access emergency shelter through any one of our emergency shelters, which we do have in those 4 hub cities of Minot, Grand Forks, Bismarck, and Fargo. There are several funding sources that contribute to keeping that shelter running, but the primary focus for us, especially when we're talking to the community about that, is for youth that have run away from home and are not feeling safe or comfortable returning to their home. To give you an example of that, we have our agency is the only runaway and homeless youth agency within the state of North Dakota. And so if you were to ever call 1-800-RUNAWAY, you'd get the national switchboard in Chicago, and they actually would connect you directly to Youthworks if it's any youth that's within our service area, which is all of North Dakota. So we would certainly have that opportunity to talk to the youth and determine what course of action is best, and indeed potentially provide emergency shelter for those youth. Our shelters also serve in other capacities. It's not uncommon for youth that might be under the custody of the county and they are unable to find a placement for them to utilize our short-term shelter for that. And it also serves as an alternative to incarceration for juveniles that have committed juvenile offenses, and it was deemed to not be appropriate. Most of the placements are very short-term. The average stay in our shelters is more like 2 to 3 days, and for a runaway youth, it cannot exceed 21 days. Many of the other youth, if they're not runaways and if it involves a system, it's really about whether that system has to have a court hearing or something determined to move forward. So in addition to those services, we're providing complementary services for the family through family counseling. Sometimes it's about mediation if a young person has been placed in our shelter and we need to help facilitate return home, work on some services and plans to try to prevent the problems that led that person from being placed from coming back again. And which leads me to kind of the other complementary services that Youthworks might have that can be helpful for the community. We do also provide some diversion services, and when I say diversion, I mean juvenile justice diversion. So all 4 of the hub cities have some level of services in place to try to work with youth to keep them from that system. In Bismarck and in Fargo, that has an emphasis on working with youth of color and zeroing in on the disproportionate minority contact that young people have with the juvenile justice system. And so we've got some specialized services and staff that are able to address and meet some of those needs that exist there. Another one of our standard programs that many of you have likely heard about is our our transitional housing for youth that are young adults. So youth that are 18 to 21 out of the Fargo location, or 18 to 24 out of the Bismarck location. And the only reason we have a variance in ages is because of the funding source that is supporting that. So in the Bismarck location, it includes some HUD funding dollars, which allows us to extend that age of youth up to age 24. So in Bismarck, we have 20 apartments, and those independent living situations are all for homeless youth that are eligible by way of the runaway and homeless youth definition or HUD's definition of homelessness. And in Fargo, we have 8 beds that are available, and we average about 5 or 6 months stay on those transitional living programs. And we have comprehensive services to support the youth and their families that will address everything from trying to get the young person reunited with the family if they were actually a young adult and they were kicked out of their parents' home and we need to help advocate for them to return, to complete independence and separation from family and learning how to be independent, take care of yourself, all the life skills, money management, employment, career planning, et cetera. Those are the levels of service that we provide. We do not overlap with youth that have disabilities that are eligible for other services. So if a youth, is developmentally disabled, they're not eligible for our programming, and our programming is not intended to meet the needs of individuals with high-level disabilities who need far greater help. It's for someone whose individual circumstances prevented them from having a place to stay, and other systems weren't able to meet their needs. And the third tier of our services that's fairly significant is our anti-human trafficking work. We have comprehensive services ranging all the way from trying to advocate for youth, developing community task forces and working with community organizations when they've encountered or identified someone who they suspect is being trafficked. Our staff have extensive training in working with individuals that are trafficked, and we focus on the youth population. So similar to the age group that we serve for our emergency shelter and for transitional housing, those that have been trafficked, we work with those that are as young as 12 and as old as 24 for those services. We do not currently have an emergency shelter specifically for people that are trafficked, and so we'll utilize the shelter that we have for youth, but we do have some host homes, which is basically that a host home is something similar to a foster home that we would have available for young people so they'd have some family to be with. So as a general rule, Youthworks is kind of at the forefront in looking at other issues that are involving youth. Another example would be in our Fargo location, we're providing out of school suspension services. So if a young person is suspended from school, instead of just staying at home, they come and work with us. We assess issues within the family, help them get their schoolwork done, and provide some level of structure for them while they can't be within the school. And so that's an example of some of the other services that we've provided that kind of complement our overall mission of working with runaway and homeless youth. So that would be all I would offer before we have any other questions or pass it off to anyone else.
Thank you, Mark. Last up, we have Jackie with ADRL. I'll let her explain.
Yep, you're good. You're good, Kathy. Okay, my PowerPoint should have popped up here for you guys. See if I can move this bar here just a little bit. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so I'm Jackie Seefeld. I work with Adult and Aging Services with the state. So I oversee the ADRL program and other programs within the agency, but I'm going to mainly talk about the ADRL because that is the forefront to get you into aging services. So we'll go from there. So the ADRL actually started back in 2012 with the North Dakota Department of Human Services, and then Aging Services administered that. In 2019, in the legislative session, Aging Services did receive some state general funds to make it more robust by allowing Aging Services to hire more full-time staff just to take all those incoming calls that would come from the entire state, nationwide, wherever they may be. And then once again, creating that single point of entry for in-home community-based services, and then creating awareness not only about the ADRL, but also about the services, whether they're the services offered through us or whether they're public services offered throughout the state. So the ADRL, once again, we provide information and referral. And once again, this assistance is available statewide. Our staff is located statewide. They are basically home-based, so they cover the entire state. They connect individuals, anybody that calls into services, whether they're looking for a meal, whether they're looking for help with their Medicare, whatever it may be. We will always connect that individual or find the connection where they may need to go in case they were sent to us incorrectly. We won't keep passing them down. We will find where they need to go so that they can get the services that they need. The ADRL is completely free. Now, some of the services might have a fee associated with them. But once again, the ADRL, for them to contact us and everything, that is completely free. So once again, we are the centralized intake for home and community-based services. So really creating that no wrong door approach. And the no wrong door approach is affiliated with that administration for community living. It's a one-stop coordinated system, the single standard process, which we do have a standard process for all the calls that come in. We're very objective, we're neutral, person-centered, so whatever the person wants, as long as it's safe and we can get that service to them, you know, it is all about them. Seamless, person-friendly, the use of private and public programs, once again, for those long-term services and supports. Okay, so once again, anybody can access the ADRL, whether you're an older individual, an individual with physical disability, a caregiver, a family, friend, neighbor, health professional, no matter who it is, they can all reach out to us. Once again, like I did state, that there is no cost for the ADRL. So currently the centralized intake, so that ADRL, we have 6 intake staff, and they assess and gather all the information for every call that comes in, provide that information and education depending upon what that individual is looking for, requesting. Maybe they do need a referral and making that appropriate referral, whether it's to our case managers, whether it's to the community service coordinators, or other outside agencies or organizations or partners. For the home and community-based services, once again, there is a pretty in-depth intake for that, but they do have to meet financial and functional criteria that is set by law. Their assets have to be under 50,000, income limits based on a sliding fee scale, but typically under that 2,000 per month. Need to meet the functional criteria. Each program is different. And I don't expect you guys to know all of this. It's just to kind of give you a little bit of information. The individual has to have a physical disability, developmental disability, so still go through the DD program. And there are some programs that they can actually still get through aging services, but those program administrators can administer those programs. They don't have to come through aging services. So individuals that are provided services under, we can pretty much provide, oops, sorry. So we can provide pretty much any service that a person, under most of the waivers, we can provide most of the services that they are going to need. The one thing that we can't do is we can't duplicate services. So let's say they're receiving family caregiver service under HCBS, under the case manager. They can't get family caregiver support under the Older American Act funds that we also have. So once again, we can mirror services, but we can't duplicate them. Once again, if they're eligible for the DD programs, that's where we'll refer them back to, and then those program administrators can administer those home and community-based services if they are eligible. And then with our community service coordinators, once again, they're out in the communities. They provide options counseling. So once again, just helping navigate wherever that person may live. So there is 6 of them across the state. So they're all designated to a certain county. So if that person lives in Valley City, is looking for services, that person that is assigned to that area would meet with that individual, gather all the resources that are available, and then present that to that individual, but it's up to that individual to make those calls. Unless they ask for some help, we will definitely help them. But we want them to make the decision on what they want. If it's someone coming into their house, whether it's getting a meal, so forth like that. So, and then once again, I talked a little bit about the family caregiver support program. We do have a companionship program, and then skilled care referrals that come from the long-term care services and supports. So other referrals that we make, this is just a short list of them, as we do make quite a few. We do work with North Dakota Assistive Safety, the Alzheimer's Association, the DD Division, Mental Health Services, economic assistance, housing coordinators. We work with Kylie quite a bit, MFP, and then vulnerable adults, and then the guardianship programs as well. So the ADRL, they kind of work under all these different funding sources, but once again, I don't expect you guys to know any of them. That is our role. But we do receive funding from the Older Americans Act, and that program funds a lot of the family caregiver program, vulnerable adults, ombudsman. We do lots of contracts with that. So the nutrition and health programs that are out there, falls prevention, legal assistance, assistive safety, etc. Then we work with the MFP program. And the MFP program does transition people out of institutional setting. They do have to, in order to qualify for MFP, they do have to be on Medicaid that last day of stay. But we do have some funds due to COVID that are called Adrl Transition funds. Not sure how long they'll last, but they don't have the same criteria. So anybody can utilize those if they do meet the other criteria that is set forth in that. And then once again, we work with the case manager. So the med waiver, SPED, expanded SPED, and some of their services are the adult daycare, foster care, residential care, chore services, EMS, or ERS, I should say, emergency response system, like the life alerts, extended personal care, or homemaker services. So this is just a snippet of our call volume. So before we started the 6 staff and really got them up to speed, and they kind of took over that whole centralized intake for the state. As you can see, back in September, prior to that even starting in 2020, we only roughly averaged around 169 calls a month. And now we're up to 900 to 1,000 calls per month, just giving upon the month, but consistently up in those 900. So we are getting lots of calls and lots of requests, which is great. That's what we want, because we really want to connect those people to what they need and can help find that resource for them too. So this is just a quick video that we did for our services.
There's no sound from the video.
So with this video that we did create, the nice thing is all those people that were in the video are people that receive services from us here at the state. So they're all North Dakota residents, and they all receive services from us, which is very nice. We do have a website too. If you go out to I always just Google North Dakota Care Choice, but it's carechoice.nd.assistguide.net. But if you go out there, if you feel comfortable navigating the web yourself, you definitely can. There's lots of nice features out there. I don't know if my mouse will work, but there's stuff with caregiver. If you go under the service, you can search for any service that's we have in our database. If we don't have them in our database, and we find out we don't have them in there, we will reach out to that individual or that organization and see if they want to be out there on the database. And then we do send them a form, so it's filled out the way they want to be represented. And then we do verify those every, so it'd be yearly for that individual, but we do go through and verify that that organization or service is still available every year. So once again, this is a nice resource. It's all the sources out there. There's a contact us, and the contact us, this would get you right to our email. And then this, you could actually do a web intake, which is really nice. So if you don't want to sit on the phone, or maybe you don't want to talk to anybody, but maybe your friend or your neighbor needs some help, you can go online and you can fill out this. It automatically will submit into our database and will go to those intake staff, and the person that's assigned to those will be reaching out to who's ever listed in that web intake of who needs to be contacted for to finish the referral, basically. So there's multiple ways you can get into aging services. Once again, you can call our toll-free number that's listed at top. You can email us at carechoice@nd.gov, or once again, you can go out to our website that I just showed. So that is pretty much aging services. So I'll let it go back to Kylie.
Thank you, Jackie. So now I think we'll just kind of open it up for discussion, questions regarding if you're working with any individuals that, could benefit from these services, and or if you've had, troubles with landlords. And these are 3 individuals that you can, potentially call and get some support. So I will just kind of open it up for discussion or comments. Again, it would probably be easier if you have a question or comment, just unmute and relay your question. There is a question in the box. Will there be a comprehensive list of contacts for these programs sent to us after the training? Are you referring to like the presenters or all the programs that they support? I think it's Janine. Are you still on, Janine?
Just generally for folks that would like to contact PNA, all of our information is available on our website. So that's probably the best way to reach us. So I will put our website.
I would say the same for Youthworks. I've typed our website in.
And this is Jackie with Aging Services. I can put our information in there. Once again, there's those 3 ways, but it will pretty much take you to that intake staff as they oversee all the will know all the programs.
I know I don't have specific questions. I know this topic was kind of brought up back in, I want to say February. We had a meeting, and I know like Burleigh County Housing Authority was having some issues with, individuals renting, things like that. So I think this discussion came about to hopefully provide information, when landlords have have renters that are having issues, whether it's, some mental health issues or, things like that, who to call, who can you get resources from, things like that. I don't know if any of you presenters want to talk about any, if you've had any calls directly to you regarding tenants renting and how things have been handled.
I'll go first on that one. It's Mark again. Most likely for us, because of our services in the young adult realm and helping homeless individuals obtain housing, our most common link is getting youth connected to having housing at first, and then maintaining contact with either the landlord or the youth or both, to help deal with any potential challenges that exist. And we also have a good amount of experience of young people becoming homeless because they were evicted, and so kind of we have opportunities to be on both ends of the spectrum. I think the best guidance that we've offered to landlords when there's been issues is that if you can give us a call and we can help figure out what those challenges are, then we potentially could prevent an eviction. We could potentially prevent problems for everybody, whether that be by helping advocate to get that young person back on track. Maybe they have mental health issues and they just need to see someone, or whether that be some of the financial challenges that are associated with it and helping the young person. Our most common issue is young people coming to us who have ignored their landlord for quite a while. And then it's gotten to this boiling over point. So that would be a message for anyone experiencing it or a landlord. Like if you have anyone that is even a month late, or just a little bit late, is to try to make some contacts right away to try to come up with a plan versus waiting until it's like way out of control.
This is Jackie with Adult and Aging Services. Just to piggyback off of Mark, we would once again try to work, depending upon the situation. If the individual has a case manager, we would reach out to that case manager that's working with that individual. Or if it's they're not assigned to a case manager, maybe their assets overqualify them for a case manager, we would help refer out to our community service coordinators. But once again, we would also work with our housing people like Kylie and all of those guys too, to see, maybe we're missing something. So we would work all together to help ensure we can get that person to stay if possible.
And we definitely at P&A have seen an uptick in calls regarding housing issues, especially since the rent or the eviction and foreclosure changes occurred with COVID. And, there was an extended period of time where someone could not be evicted, or their utilities could not be shut off, or there could not be a foreclosure due to the pandemic. But that was lifted federally, and North Dakota also lifted that. And so we have seen a definite increase in calls regarding housing issues for people that are experiencing challenges. And North Dakota Fair Housing is a great resource. If people need accommodations, if they need support and assistance, there's some additional rental programs that are available within the state for rental assistance using some additional COVID funds. So that, I think, we're going to continue to see at a higher level as some of those post-COVID things become more problematic for folks. But I would definitely agree with Mark that getting those calls earlier than later, because sometimes you get so far into it that a landlord is just not willing to work, or a mortgage company is not willing to look at a forgiveness of a period of time because that forgiveness period is just too great. And so that becomes much more difficult the further into that process that we end up seeing people. So while P&A does not do housing as a priority area in advocacy, if it's tied to deinstitutionalization or someone that's at risk of going into an institution, there's ways that we can kind of get around that. But it's really using some of those great resources that are out there to be able to accomplish some of that. And we have a number of landlords that are really good to work with. But there is a definite breaking point where they're saying, we've let this go so long and we just can't do it any longer.
I want to answer, there's a chat box question, a follow-up from Kylie about what about an evicted mother who has a teenager? And what assistance might there be for that young person? That's a really good question, Kylie. It does depend on the geography in terms of where and what type of services might exist, and even the actual age of the teenager. So if you'd like to unmute, it might be helpful to even kind of clarify on that. If not, I can certainly speak generically.
Oh, no problem. So we're located in northwestern North Dakota,
Williston?
northwestern of Williston.
Okay.
I mean, we're up
Northwest of
north.
Williston? So
Yeah,
Crosby
we're up-
or
No, we're in Tioga.
Tioga? Okay, I'm from
Yeah.
Kenmare originally, so I got you.
Okay,
The first thought I have is that every school district, is this person a high school student,
yes,
a teenager? Every high school district has to have what's called a McKinney-Vento worker. They're a homeless student liaison. So get in touch with your school district in Tioga, and they should be able to have someone who can help figure out extra resources for that person, specifically making sure there's that there's transportation for school, there's other barriers that can be resolved. So in the smaller communities, it is more challenging. So I'm glad I dug a little bit deeper on that, because there might be some services, for example, in Bismarck, for the youth to receive that might not necessarily be available in the smaller communities. So that would be the main thing, would be to get in touch with the McKinney-Vento worker, that homeless student liaison, and what help they might be able to provide. But your timing is perfect, because we just finished, we as in a group of individuals interested in advocating for youth homeless issues, through the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency, wrote for and received a grant from HUD to try to address some of the needs of youth. And one of the things that's been discussed is, how do we address youth homelessness that's rural? And how do we try to meet more of those needs? So I'm glad you gave that as an example, because it's one of the examples that we've been struggling with, is there's not necessarily the resources that exist there. Typically in the larger communities, that the family would be seen as a family, and housing would be allocated for both of them. If this is a situation where you've got a youth who actually is homeless separate, has ran away, doesn't have care, their parents have caused them to be discarded, then Youthworks can be a resource regardless of where you're at in the state. And calling wherever our nearest location is, we'd be able to help out with that. And clearly, I know we have a lot of mandated reporters on the phone, and knowing that if that was to be the case too, then you'd certainly have your local human service zones that are mandated. I'm sure Pam could chime in also about the mandated part of that, but knowing that there has to be that level of in support.
another question then is, I'd have to inform that family that they would have those services available to them. I wouldn't be able to approach the school and inform the school of the private matter of the of the tenant.
All you would need is a release of information. So if your tenant is willing to sign a release of information for you to call the school, then you certainly could do that. But yeah, you're right. If you have a family that's not willing and you're worried about the teenager, the only thing I would say you could consider would be that human service zone, report of abuse and neglect, potentially, if you felt like this was a family who couldn't meet the needs of the child because of their housing status. And the child welfare system should take that as a priority and try to help the entire family with housing versus just remove the child.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Pam, there's a question for you. I'm somewhat familiar with the Minnesota Mental Health Law Project. Is there a comparable program in North Dakota?
We would consider that to be our individual justice plan program. So IJP planning, where it looks at diversion and alternative responses to formal involvement in the juvenile or correctional system for people with disabilities. And we do a significant number of them with individuals that have mental illness. So there's great information, a copy of our electronic IJP manual on our website, all of the forms. And that is something that we do quite a bit of too from an advocacy perspective. So that would be similar to the Mental Health Law Project that is actually available in several states across the nation.
I'd like to answer the question about the suicidal teenager, if that's okay too. And I believe one of our listeners put 211 in the box, which is really good, because 211 is going to connect you to the human service centers and their mobile crisis units. And so that would be the quickest way to get that. The main thing I would say is to make sure when you're calling 211 that there is an understanding of what level of seriousness it is, you know, how urgent that is. You have someone literally with a gun, you have someone who's made some type of threats, so that they can do the proper amount of sorting out what's the right intervention to provide for that family. So 211 will access any of the mobile crisis units across the entire state.
And a lot of what our staff will also go through, which is much like the ADRL system also, is really trying to identify what type of environment that teenager is in. Is there supportive people within that relationship circle that can ensure safety, or is there a need for intervention because we know that the person has a designed plan, or what is that imminent danger component? So those are some of the things that our intake staff will work through to determine that need to intervene quickly, or do we need to come in supportively because we don't have an emergent life-threatening need.
By the way, Jackie, sorry for stealing it. I didn't see that was you that answered that. If you have anything to add, Pam and I are stealing your thunder on that one.
Hop in, Jackie.
No, I just know that 211, and then we've been working with behavioral health. The state plan on aging is due July to administration for community living, but will be effective October 1. But they are doing a new national line, is the 9882. And so there will be a lot of information coming out. I believe it's effective July 1, just to make it a little bit more consistent from what I've read out on SAMHSA's website and stuff like that. But there is going to be another, but with North Dakota, it's still, if you go to that 211, it's still going to get you to the same place. So behavioral health contracts with 211.
Okay, we have a couple more coming through in the chat. Twyla, it looks like Pam answered your question. Putting the individual who's in the Ward County Jail can call PNA and request assistance with an IJP. In this situation, brother at 17 killed himself last summer. The mom is more interested in boyfriend, so the young man wanders town sometimes. His younger brother is with him. Excuse me. It is horrible to see, and I feel so helpless. That came from Vicky. Mark, because of the opiate crisis, there are a number of young people, angry young people, who have a parent who is incarcerated, with the grandparent trying their best to get support and do the best for their grandkids. One I know has tried every resource she can find. It's been a battle with custody, with other grandparents. Social services has been involved, school, and it's just a circle that's getting worse. Now the 12-year-old is cutting. This is one situation that I know of. If I knew who to call, I would.
That is something that would be appropriate for Youthworks. What makes that tricky is that it might be that if we got involved, we might also be making referrals, though, especially with the cutting. It would indicate mental health services. But our organization has done a lot of kind of family mediation and supports when there's issues of kids potentially running away, or even just being at risk of that, which certainly this situation is a good example of. Another thing that comes to mind is mentoring, and finding a mentoring program nearby that might be available, whether that be Big Brother, Big Sister, or others, because this young person clearly is in need of some support without that family being able to do that with the incarcerated parents. Or one of the parents, I think, yeah. One parent is incarcerated. And it's never a bad idea to call into organizations like Youthworks, or to make that call to 211 for those resources to kind of maybe drill down further on some of these to figure out what the real best option is. Sometimes it is frustrating because you're calling and maybe that isn't the place that can actually provide the best level of care. It wouldn't surprise me also if this young person started getting into trouble at school. And so sometimes those are the other indicators when I made reference to us doing some delinquency prevention programming, that this is an example that is fairly common for us, is that the youth comes to us because they got cited by the court, but then we get the rest of the story, which is similar to what you've shared, Barbara, and kind of figure out how to address all of those issues together. And again, there are some variances based on your location within the state and what level of supports or services might be. Oh, yeah, I love your next question. 24% of homeless youth that Youthworks served identified as LGBTQ+. We offer support groups in both our Fargo and Bismarck offices for LGBTQ youth. We're well connected to all of the advocate organizations that are working to, Dakota Outright, for example, in Bismarck, and other organizations to support young people. And you're in Jamestown, which is, that's a tough one. Yeah, where in Jamestown is there? But it is I guess what I would say is, statistically speaking, and this makes sense, especially in conservative North Dakota, that there's plenty of parents who are going to say, I don't accept who you say you are. And so the rate of homelessness, the rate of running away is significantly higher for this population. 25%, I don't need to tell you, is a really high, ridiculously high rate. But the other thing that is even more concerning that we see every day is the amount of depression, suicidality that's associated, it's a comorbid factor that goes along with that rejection and lack of acceptance and family kind of discourse that exists there. I'm not certain if there's a P flag. That's another idea. If you've not heard of P flag stands for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. And so I'm not 100% sure if Jamestown has one, but there are locations, or there are services in Bismarck and Fargo on both sides of Jamestown that do have P flag resources, supports. It's parents on a more grassroots level who are helping each other out and supporting each other under those type of circumstances. And then the other statewide group that would really be a great contact would be the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition. Barry Nelson is the chair, leader, director of the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition, and they do some really good advocacy work for youth that are LGBTQ+.
Kylie, you might have to cut us off because I know that the three of us could go on forever and ever.
I know. It's been great information. I was just going to give it maybe one more minute to see if another question maybe popped in. Absolutely. And then kind of go from there. We also recorded today's session. So we will put it on our YouTube link and get that sent out here probably at the end of the week. So those that weren't able to attend, they can at least go back and get the information. So I'll give it another minute, and if there's any other questions, or if anybody wants to pop in and ask or have any questions, comments, please do so. Just a quick reminder too, if you need a certificate of participation, please type your first and last name and email in the chat box. Again, these are just certificates of participation. So we'll give it a little bit, another 30 seconds to a minute or so, and kind of go from there. doesn't appear that there's any more questions. So thank you again, Pam, Mark, and Jackie for presenting today. It was great information. Again, if anybody needs to reach out to those agencies, please do so. Also, I will leave the chat box open for a few more minutes to get those contacts in for certificates. So please get those in. Thanks again for everybody attending today's session. Next week, we have mandatory reporting with Aging Services and Children and Family Services. So hope to see everybody next week as well. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.